Well, in the Middle East, meanwhile, the rolling back of ISIS continues. The retaking of Raqqa in Syria means the loss of the last major foothold for the radical Islamic terrorists in that country. Iraqi forces also have fully recaptured Mosul from the terror group. Now, many in Congress say to fully eradicate the Islamic State, the AUMF, the authorization for the use of military force that was first passed in response to the al-Qaeda attacks on 9/11, well, it must be rewritten. Joining us now for more on this is Indiana Republican Senator Todd Young, a member of the Senate Committee of Foreign Relations, and he is in Bloomington, Indiana tonight. He's also a veteran who served in the United States Marine Corps as an intelligence officer. So, Senator, tonight we thank you for your service in the Marines and thank you as a member of that exclusive club of 100 on Capitol Hill. Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you. I want to thank all our veterans and their families for their selfless service and sacrifice today.
That is for sure. Meanwhile, the AUMF, the authorization is in place. Why does it need to be reworked in your view?
Well, we're currently operating under a 2001 authorization for the use of military force. Your viewers will recall that law, which was almost unanimously supported in Congress, was designed to go after those who were responsible for 9/11. We've had over 16 years passed since that time. To the extent a legal argument can be made that that law still applies, that argument becomes increasingly attenuated. So beyond the legalities, I think it's really important that we as an institution, we as the people's branch of government, speak with a unified voice and indicate that we are prepared to reaffirm our support for the men and women who wear the uniform and fight to keep us free and their families.
I mean, the threats, as you know, have gone beyond al-Qaeda. We've got radical Islamic groups. You've got the jihadi philosophy, for example, and in Niger. So tragically, David Johnson, the sergeant who we just talked about a moment ago, the reports showing that he may have been captured, his arms tied behind his back. And that's an offshoot. He apparently killed, murdered in cold blood, in an operation with 1,000 soldiers in Niger who are fighting the radical philosophy there. He apparently killed by an offshoot of ISIS. Would that be covered under the new AUMF, and should it be written in a broader way to protect us from these terrorist threats?
Well, so that's one of the reasons we need a new AUMF, is so that we ensure that these offshoots or these franchises of whether it's al-Qaeda or ISIS are covered under the new law. And I've worked ever since March, when I first introduced a new AUMF on this very topic, to come up with mechanisms so that we could cover these groups as they evolve, as they come up with different names, as they occupy different geographies and threaten different populations. And I think we're at a spot, having worked with both Republicans and Democrats, where we're very close to coming up with something that can pass out of Congress and something that will, in fact, cover all these different groups and contingencies while incentivizing members of Congress to continuously review the war plans of this and future presidents. And along the way, I and others, I think, should be prepared to make principled compromises to make sure that we get this done. There is nothing more important with respect to our constitutional authorities than the importance of declaring war or using military force. And we can't abdicate that responsibility as members of Congress.
And speaking of your constitutional mandates, are you concerned now or in the future that a president could potentially abuse the power of the presidency in terms of launching airstrikes without the congressional authorization?
Well, I'm not concerned as long as we stay vigilant on committees like the Foreign Relations Committee. And we've not only held hearings on this topic of late, but we're prepared to move forward, and I believe to mark up, that is, consider formally in a committee an authorization for the use of military force in coming weeks. So I think we're doing right by the American people, not only by having this conversation, but by acting on it. And it's my hope that in coming weeks we'll have a bill ready that will earn both Republican and Democratic support.
All right. Now, meanwhile, in the coming weeks, you've got that bill. And there's something else coming down the pike in a couple of weeks, as you know, that has to do with taxes. It goes before the Senate Budget Committee next week. They expect to have a vote just after Thanksgiving, we're told. What do you expect? Do you think they'll get this done?
Yeah, I do. I think the president really got us off on the right foot. First of all, he unveiled his tax plan in Indianapolis, which was a nice start. But beyond that, I like the president's framework. The president essentially wants globally competitive rates for our businesses. He wants to ensure that every American has the opportunity to keep more of their hard-earned money, and he wants a simpler code, one where there's less of Washington picking winners and losers, and more freedom for consumers and for investors to figure out what they're going to do with their hard-earned money. If we do that, we'll grow the economy faster. The Senate just released our bill, and I'm still studying it, but I have to say, I think it fulfills all the president's requirements, and I believe we're going to get this done, hopefully, before the end of the year.
Yeah, there's some differences with the House bill. Of course, it'll go to reconciliation. But meanwhile, I mean, there are estimates that while some middle-class taxpayers can get as much as $1,300 or so back, you know, it may raise the taxes on other middle-class taxpayers. How do you balance that out to make sure the middle class isn't hurt?
Yeah, I think the objective here, our guiding light, should be to make sure that this works for the middle class and for people of modest means who are struggling to take care of their families. Obviously, the economy's changed a lot in the 30-plus years since we last reformed the tax code, and the code has become really complex in the interim. You know, I think if we really focus on the middle class and people of modest means, which I believe we've attempted to do in the Senate bill, then the vast majority of Americans are going to benefit from this. And really, the real benefits are going to be realized not in the first couple of years. The real benefits will be longer term, because as businesses find it more advantageous to invest in their own workers and to invest in the capital that makes those workers more productive, they're going to be increasing the value of all of the work that the American rank-and-file worker does, and that leads to increases in wages. And in the end, that's all the American people want. They want a pathway to opportunity for themselves and for their children and grandchildren, good-paying jobs for everyone if they work hard and play by the rules.
Senator Todd Young, we thank you tonight. Thank you for your service, as we said before, and you know, get to work on those taxes and also the AUMF, and we thank you for coming tonight from Indiana.
Thanks so much, Eric.
Of course. Have a good night.